has to be the citizen overseers who takes the responsibility to be expert in their own freedom, in their own government, in their own forms and checks and balances. A free people cannot delegate the responsibility to be expert in the principles and forms of freedom to officials, academics, specialists, upper classes, elites, or anyone else, or their freedoms will decrease. When you want to know something, when you want to make sure you have something correct, you go to an expert, right? If you need to check your appendix or a tumor in the brain, or you have heart issues, you're going to go and talk to some experts in the field. We cannot delegate the responsibility to be expert in the principles and forms of freedom. We should be expert citizen overseers. He says that the children, the youth, are discussing and talking about current events around the dinner table. This foundation of education, of thinking, was so important. And they taught these principles, these forms, from the Bible, from Shakespeare, from Plutarch and Gibbons and Polybius, and the articles and the essays being published at the time, the Federalist Papers. I cannot delegate the role of local councils of all adults. Sadly, in the United States of America today, this no longer exists. You learn mercy. You learn leadership. You learn compromise. You learn to listen. You learn to actually debate, to discuss. And you strengthen each other in finding the actual and the best ways forward. We tend to be way more respectful when they are in the room with us. We can learn to work together with people we disagree with. But when we as all adults, all people, can't come together and take on those hot topics, those difficult conversations, those difficult discussions and passionate politics, if we can't learn to come together and disagree cordially, we keep politics separate and then yell at each other and slander each other. We can't talk these hot topics. We can't have this discussion. We can't moderate. We can't strengthen each other through debate and discussion, through argument. That is our best training ground. And getting rid of that is one of the most critical and dangerous slippery slopes that we've started. If free people cannot delegate the roles of local councils of all adults, or their freedoms will decrease. If there's a problem, people are going to step up and do it. They're going to solve it. They're not going to sit back and wait for somebody else to solve the problem. They're going to be part of the solution. The actual principle here, the actual necessary component, is that the long-term effect is that we have freedom and liberty, opportunity, prosperity for all, not just a few. The more we delegate local issues and problems to be handled and solved at the bureaucratic, at the state, at the national levels, the less there is a need for the school of freedom to exist. The difference with government, where we can't just delegate it like that, where we can't just hire it out and then expect goods and services. One, government is not a business providing goods and services. They are taking other people's money by force to fund certain projects. A business, if it uses force, gets shut down and they go to jail. They have a monopoly on force, and we need that accountability. We delegate to government only the things that are important enough that it needs force and it needs to take the right amount of checks and balances of time to accomplish that thing. We need enough citizen overseers, enough statesmen and women at each tier. As a reminder, let's go over the 7 sectors of society. We have the family sector. We have the community sector, the religion sector, academia, the media, 6 is business, 7 is government. It's a dangerous thing to say, oh, somebody else will do it. Societies that delegated their authority, their councils of local government, who delegated the understanding, the expertise of principles and forms, who delegated their roles as citizen overseers to the point where there weren't enough regular people, non-government officials, who were expert in freedom. The societies that did that turned into centralized powerhouses, turned into empires, and then eventually collapsed. Consider the decline and the collapse of the Roman Empire. Consider the French Revolution era of the late 1700s and into the 1800s. Russia during the Bolshevik Revolution, early 1900s. We have a similar situation. Yet again, we have almost the exact same story with Nazi Germany in the early 1900s. Consider the book They Thought They Were Free. The Germans themselves, they were good people. The masses weren't Nazis. They didn't have the expertise. They weren't citizen overseers. They delegated too much of their authority. And too many of them were still part of the peasant class, or just coming out of the peasant class. If the poor are not well cared for, if the middle class is not large and big enough, if we don't have enough citizen overseers, it devolves into bloodshed. Freedom will decrease. The societies that didn't delegate their authority away, but in fact the people stood up and pushed back for their role to participate. We get a bunch of stories, Coriolanus from Shakespeare and other histories that we read, Plutarch's Lives. We get tons of stories where certain individuals or certain people say, no, we have this freedom, we require this freedom. And the Bolshevik Revolution is almost on this list. They almost had a freedom shift. Again, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't ideal where they were giving concessions and where they were both agreeing on. I think they still had a long ways to go, but it was a step in the right direction, starting the right momentum. And there's so many countries around the world that have that same story that's so close. But then you get a few ambitious individuals who won't let it settle, who won't let the freedom shift turn and then grow and develop and adjust for a generation or 3 to 4 generations so that they can keep the momentum growing. England's history is something pretty special along those lines. It had its bloody times, it's had its difficulties, but gradually adjusting to a freedom shift, gradually giving more freedom and more stewardship, gradually delegating more authority from the top back to the bottom. You see the ancient Greek city-states that again and again we see engaged citizens taking their turns, being actively involved. The Georgics by Virgil, other writings by Virgil, you see a lot of that from the Roman Republic, an engaged citizenry. The Scottish Rebellion with William Wallace instigating, taking the lead in the 1200s. A resurgence of tribal leadership over national control. The Saracens were fantastic with this tribal leadership. A strong, powerful nation, but confederated, almost to a weakness, kind of like the Articles of Confederation with the colonies. We cannot delegate the work, the effort, the investment, the time, the energy it takes to be experts in the principles and forms and the activities, especially of local councils, of government. We need to be citizen overseers.